Hi everyone, it's Josh here from Alternative Brewing, and today we're doing a comparison video between the AeroPress and the Delta Coffee Press. And at looks alone, it's difficult to see how different they are. But a further comparison on all the brewing variables, they don't really match up that easily. So we're going to take a further look at how each one brews coffee, and then you'll begin to see how different they are. The AeroPress is a full immersion brewer, which is another way of saying that the coffee and water mix in together in the same chamber, similar to a French press. Whereas the Delta Coffee Press is an injection brewer. So this keeps the water separate from the coffee until you press down on the plunger. And then the water will be forced through the bed of coffee, similar to an espresso in that way. Now on the one hand, I'm super familiar with the AeroPress. I've used it for almost 10 years and I have hundreds of memories making AeroPresses all across the world. I've even got an AeroPress tattoo on my arm, so it's without question, I'm a pretty big fan of the AeroPress. And now I've got a bet going here with the team that if this video gets over 100,000 views in 6 months, then I'll get a Delta Coffee Press on the other side of my arm, just to even up the stakes here. Now the Delta Coffee Press came out in late 2018. It's newer to the scene of those portable, easy to use and unbreakable coffee brewers. And I've got some hometown pride for this brewer too, because it has been designed right here in Brisbane, Australia. Now in terms of build quality of each of these, they're both made really well with indestructible materials. And both are practically idiot-proof, but the AeroPress does have a few less parts to it, keeping it really simple to a brew chamber, a plunger with a silicone seal, and the filter cap. The Delta Coffee Press, you've got the same 3 parts with a water chamber, a plunger, and a dosing cap, but there are a few extra seals, like the jet seal. And this is what separates the water from the coffee, and it offers really impressive distribution of water, something missing in a lot of other brewers. Now you can use paper or metal filters with both of these brewers, but I found using a metal filter with the AeroPress does produce a muddier, heavier tasting brew, which isn't my favorite, but the Delta Coffee Press isn't that bad, and I'd say it even improves the brew at the end using a metal filter, but that's just my experience. Aesthetically speaking, I personally enjoy the clear look of the Delta here, and the markings on the Delta Press make volumetric sense, so you can accurately brew without needing scales, whereas I've not paid too much attention to the numbers on the AeroPress. Now the AeroPress holds 240-270 mils of water when brewing, and you're not limited to the dose you can use. So a regular recipe of mine with the AeroPress for a single cup of coffee would be 18 gram dose to a 220 gram yield. But if you're going for a more espresso-like strong brew, you can hit those very low ratios of coffee to water, say like a 1:3. In that way, you're placing in 50 grams of coffee to 150 mils of water. And this is also the only real way you're going to be able to brew multiple cups with the AeroPress at once. The Delta Press, you are limited to the dose you can fit into the chamber, but that's still upwards of 28-30 grams of coffee, but you're not limited to the amount of water you can press through those grounds. So through the design of the Delta, you can easily refill the water chamber and then press down again and again. And again. I found some of my favorite Delta brews are where I've dosed 22 grams of coffee in to get around 500 mils of brewed coffee out for a ratio of like a 1:22, 1:24, which works nicely if you're saving on coffee and you're brewing for more people. But a more standard brew with the Delta Press would be a 20 gram dose to 200 gram yield. So in talking about grind sizes and brew times, which are relatable, the AeroPress, I've been all over the place, from using really coarse grinds to long 4-minute brews, to really fine grinds and quick 1-minute brews. And nowadays it's somewhere in the middle, like a 2-minute mark, and I found a really nice balance here with a medium grind. Not yet full circle. The Delta Press, I will suggest, is a longer brew time, around 2.5-3 minute mark, not all that much longer, because it is a much slower press down on the plunger, as you can control the contact time of water to coffee. Here, if you push too fast, you'll most likely end up with a really weak brew. So with that in mind, I'd go for a finer grind using the Delta Press. And it's funny, with the AeroPress, if you push too fast, you'll end up with a dirtier brew. So you can see how different they are when comparing these variables. In talking pre-infusion or blooming, with the AeroPress, it's pretty straightforward. Throw your coffee in, add your water, and then let it sit. I'll mention there is 2 methods with the AeroPress, the original and obviously the inverted method, and brewing with the inverted method does allow you to control with pre-infusion a little more. And there's generally a stir or agitation here too to make sure your grounds get nice and wet. Pre-infusing with the Delta is equally as simple as it has those volumes marked on the side here, designed in a way you can pre-infuse without scales. Now, a good pre-infusion requires twice as much water as you have grinds. So unless you're adding 25 grams of coffee to a 50-gram bloom with the Delta press, it's a little tricky to be precise, but do remember you have to press down on this plunger for the water to interact with the grinds. And because there's no agitation as a brewing variable with the Delta press, I would press down really slowly on the pre-infusion to allow for your grinds to swell in the dosing cup and ensuring all those grounds have been equally pre-infused before extraction occurs. Looking at after pre-infusion, the AeroPress, you can add any additional water you like in increments all the way up to its full capacity. Then you generally let it steep for about a minute or so, and then if you're in the inverted method, you're going to flip. And that flip does create an inconsistent variable where there's no way of knowing whether you've done it quite the same again. And the grinds are fully immersed here until you press out into your cup steadily. However, I've discovered with the Delta coffee press, you're able to make all different variations in your brew, say varying water temperature, contact times, multiple presses throughout the extraction, and having those grinds separate to the water means those variables are more consistent. And I believe this could produce a more even extraction, or at least a consistent extraction within your dose. Now, suggestions are not pressing the plunger down all the way with the AeroPress, as this compresses the grinds and squeezes out some astringency into the cup. The Delta coffee press is easier to avoid this, and it's best to try and remove all the water in the water chamber by doing a final press down. But in cleaning both of these units, the AeroPress is famous for being really simple to clean. And once you've pressed out all your water, you simply just undo that cap and pop out the puck. With a quick rinse, you're good to go again, or you can place it away for storage. And the Delta coffee press isn't really far off that mark. It does take a moment or two longer to rinse out your brew chamber, but overall it's about the same amount of time for upkeep, and it will last you a very long time. They both come with their own thought out accessories. The AeroPress has a bean scoop, stirrer and funnel, and the Delta coffee press has a bean scoop that also seconds as a plug for on top of the water chamber when you press down. And in drinking both brews side by side, they're very different brews. The AeroPress is usually a heavier tasting cup of coffee, more akin to that French press, but cleaner again. The Delta press, I would say, is more similar to a pour over brew like a V60 because it has that cleanliness. Now with the AeroPress, you're usually working around trying to limit the extraction and avoiding over extraction. And you do this by dropping the water temperature, shortening the brew time, and perhaps adding a bypass by diluting the final cup with a bit more water. But the Delta press, on the other hand, I found is the complete opposite, and I find myself trying to increase the extraction by finding the grind, using hotter water on the bloom, longer brew times, and more water passing through your dose. Either way, I do love using both of these brewing devices, and the AeroPress is still my #1 travel coffee brewer. But if I were buying a new brewing device now, I think I'd get the Delta coffee press. It's capable of making larger brews at once using less coffee, and it's as portable as the AeroPress. And I think that's my verdict served right there. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on these two brewers. Throw your comment below, tell me which one you brew with and how you like to brew with it. And thanks for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to keep following when we bring out videos just like this one each week. Until then, see you next time.